You could be the key to helping change lives. Join a clinical trial with Nucleus Network in Minneapolis and be a part of groundbreaking research. Nucleus Network has been conducting clinical research studies for over 15 years. Right now, Nucleus Network is looking for people with moderate to severe kidney impairment to participate in their upcoming clinical studies. If eligible, your participation could help advance research of investigational medications that are being developed to treat a variety of medical conditions. Nucleus Network is offering compensation ranging from $2,000 to $7,000 for study participation time. If you or someone you know has kidney disease, check your eligibility for Nucleus Network's upcoming studies now at nucleusnetwork.com. Your participation matters. Learn more about Nucleus at nucleusnetwork.com. Again, nucleusnetwork.com.
I'm sure that PCOS added to or was one of the foundations of the reason I believed that I had to diet. I would hear people talk about intuitive eating. I would hear, this and that, different ways to heal. There were times when I was like, I think I have a problem with food, but I have to get this under control. I am hurting myself by eating or whatever, or what, the stakes felt so high because of what I believed was the cause of PCOS. I thought it was food, I thought it was weight, and I thought it was carbs and sugar.
Hey, Love Food listener, Julie Duffy Dillon here. I'm preparing season 4 of the Love Food podcast. And in the meantime, I'm rebroadcasting the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. Kimmie Singh and I interviewed people navigating their food peace journey while affected by a chronic condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome. Do you not experience this, yet experience diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, or another condition and don't want to diet? Or are you feeling shame every time you leave the doctor's office or avoid them altogether because of the weight talk? Or are you looking for more body-liberating resources? Well, then we made this podcast just for you. Pencil me in for Tuesday, September 17th, when season 4 of a Love Food podcast begins. And now, the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. Take care.
Chapter 4, Caroline Dooner and how PCOS recommendations started her eating disorder.
Hi, and welcome to the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. I am Julie Duffy Dillon.
And I am Kimmie Singh. We're so glad that you're here. We put this show together with you in mind, and we hope it provides you the companionship that you're looking for as you navigate your PCOS journey.
Kimmie and I have worked really hard to put this show together to shine a light on voices often not heard in PCOS circles. You will hear from people like Jess Baker, Ivy Felicia, Sophie Carter-Kahn, and many others. Every interviewee was asked a series of questions about their PCOS journey, and this episode features Caroline Dooner. She's a wellness coach and body image expert. She's also author and podcaster behind something called the Fuck It Diet. And I want to announce that now because you're going to hear the word fuck a lot. So if there's listeners that won't like that word or you don't want them to hear that word, you may want to just turn the volume down. So we're going to start today's episode like we start every chapter of the PCOS and Food Peace podcast with a listener question. We gathered these questions on Instagram, through our Facebook community, and email newsletter.
Today's question comes from our Instagram page. Check us out on Instagram at Food Peace Dietitian and at Tasting Abundance. So the handle name Intuitive Eating Simona asks us, my doctor won't test me for PCOS since there's no cure, but he says I should eat less sugar and exercise regularly. But I've had the eating disorder mindset due to restrictions. I'm not willing to change my diet, and I'm at risk for an eating disorder again. So what do I do? Do I really need restrictions to make it better?
Oh, I don't, Kimmie, like reading this question, I have I can't get past something in there. Like I know that really what this person's asking about is help continuing to recover from an eating disorder while managing PCOS. But there's something about her doctor not wanting to test her because there's no cure for PCOS. So like, why have that information just makes me feel really angry. I don't know if you had that reaction.
Yeah, I feel like there's a really consistent story about people with PCOS feeling like doctors are withholding information or not seeing them as worthy of having information about their health. And I think this is definitely another instance like that.
Oh, it's so horrible because like knowledge is power. Isn't that the cheesy saying? So like, why would that, like, just because we don't have a cure for it, should we not know about it? I don't know. It just seems like so old school and so not helpful. And also making the judgment for the person. You know, I think she should be able to be the one to decide what happens to her body and what she knows about it. But anyway, yeah, but on to what she was asking about with the eating disorder. I feel like for so long when I was working with people with eating disorders and also experiencing PCOS, I felt stumped by this. It was something that was really hard to put together because the first line of treatment for PCOS is pursuing weight loss and restricting food intake. And I had known from working in eating disorders for a while that like the number one way to help people to recover is to say, make sure you never go on another diet and make sure you don't like limit yourself unless you absolutely are going to like go into anaphylactic shock, you know, because that's enough to trigger the genetic susceptibility for the eating disorder to turn back on. And so I know it can be really challenging, but the part that helped me to kind of make peace with the two of them is really appreciating that restrictions and pursuing weight loss, they don't work long term. So they're really not the solution anyway for managing PCOS. And aligning with our body and listening to what our body says while also doing things like taking medications or supplements, like that you can trust the body to give that information as long as the body is supportive and safe, you know? And so helping to make that happen to me is more doable, more sustainable, and more long-term. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kimmie.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think that with restricting, we all know where it leads to for everybody, but especially for people with PCOS, you have to find that gentleness with your body and your desires around food.
Right. Yeah. So yes, Instagrammer, you know, what's Simona, intuitive eating Simona. Just know that you can continue to work on recovery and work towards recovery and not pursue these like weight loss or these diets like this person is suggesting. You can do that for sure. And leading into what your body's saying is a way to start to do that. I'm excited to share our interview with Caroline Dooner, and we're going to hear from Caroline in just a moment. We're going to pause right now, though, for a short commercial break.
Looking for a side hustle that can have a huge impact? Nucleus Network has been conducting clinical research studies for over 15 years. Right now, Nucleus Network in Minneapolis is looking for healthy people ages 18 to 55 to join their upcoming clinical studies and is offering compensation ranging from $2,000 to $7,000. Get involved today. Check your eligibility now at nucleusnetwork.com. That's nucleusnetwork.com.
This rebroadcast of the PCOS and Food Peace podcast is brought to you by my PCOS and Food Peace courses. If you're experiencing PCOS, I know at some point you were told you have to diet in order to promote health, like forever. So what do you do when you've tried every diet and it hasn't worked? What do you do if you know diets don't work for most people? So why would they work when you have PCOS? I have a course just for you. I have a 12-step system that I take people through who are wanting to move away from diets, heal their relationship with food, do intuitive eating work, and promote health at the same time. Yeah, it's possible. If you want to look at all the details, go to PCOSandFoodPeace.com. And keep in mind that I have a 25% off coupon that when you're in the checkout area, just put in the coupon code podcast and you'll get 25% off. So I look forward to seeing you within the course. And if you're a dietitian who helps people with PCOS, which so many people are affected by this condition. So I have a feeling if you're a dietitian, you are working with people with PCOS. And if you're a dietitian who is HAES informed or uses only non-diet approaches, if you don't, well, look into them because they're a really important part of the PCOS healing experience. And if you want some more tools to help those clients with PCOS, go to the course I designed just for you. It has 20 continuing education units through CDR, and you can get to all the details at PCOSandfoodpeace.com/dietitians. This rebroadcast is also brought to you by Kimmie Singh's work at tastingabundance.com. So Kimmie Singh, when she recorded this podcast with me, was finishing up her master's degree in nutrition and starting her dietetic internship, and she is all done. She is a dietitian now and seeing clients. If you would like to know more about her work, she does speaking nationally, and she also works with clients individually. If you'd like to know more about her work, go to tastingabundance.com. All right, enough of all that. Let's get back to the show. Kimmie and I are thrilled to share our interview with Jess Baker. She's a positive, progressive, and magnificently irreverent force to be reckoned with in the realm of self-love, advocacy, and mental health. She believes in the importance of body autonomy, hard conversations, strong coffee, and even stronger language. She does all of these in our interview, and we loved it. After creating satirical versions of Abercrombie & Fitch advertisements in 2013, she appeared on The Today Show and quickly became one of the leading voices in the current body image movement. That's why it was so important to include Jess Baker in the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. When not writing, Jess spends her time speaking around the world, working with plus-size clothing companies, organizing body liberation events, taking pictures in her underwear, and attempting to convince her cats that they liked to wear bow ties. Learn more about Jess at themilitantbaker.com. The interview with Jess is coming up next, following this brief commercial break. This PCOS and Food Peace podcast is being brought to you by Theralogics, the makers of Ovasitol, an inositol supplement with a blend of myo-inositol and D-chiro-inositol, and the body's optimal ratio of 40:1. Inositols are nutrients that help to decrease insulin resistance, promote menstrual regularity, restore ovulation, and balance hormone levels. In convenient powder form, Ovasitol can be enjoyed in your favorite beverage or smoothie. Available in both a canister and convenient single-serving packets, Ovasitol contains 100% pure inositols with no additives. It also is the only inositol supplement that I recommend to my clients with PCOS because it does have that very important 40:1 ratio and is third-party tested. Order online today at Theralogics.com. That's Theralogix.com. And during checkout, be sure to use my PRC code 127410, and you will get an exclusive PCOS and Food Peace podcast discount. Also, be sure to listen to the end of this episode where we will give you the opportunity to win a free 90-day supplies of Ovasitol. So go to Theralogix.com and use the PRC code 127410. Hi, Caroline.
Hey.
Tell us how you figured out you have PCOS.
So I was 14 years old and I was late getting my period. My body had developed already. I had super big boobs, like all of a sudden in like a half a year. But I didn't get my period. And when I finally did, it wasn't regular for a while. So I might have been like almost 15 at this point. And my mother was very over worried, which definitely bled into then my experience with PCOS. But we were at the doctor and my dad's sister had PCOS. And so she was just so worried that I had it. It had been on her mind. And she asked them to test, and they tested my hormones. And essentially I had high testosterone. And so they said, well, she probably has PCOS. But we're going to do the ultrasound. And basically in that doctor's office, I was 14, almost 15. Have always been like a pretty low weight set range, but it was all relative, of course, at the time, because I had just gone through puberty. They were like, okay, well, we're just going to put you on the pill and you need to go on a diet and keep your weight down and exercise. So low carb, low fat, and start exercising and you'll be fine. We'll just manage this. And I was like, okay. And basically, that was the beginning of an eating disorder, because I believed that it was like super justified to be really obsessed with food and weight to manage, or in my case, I believed that I was going to heal, like miraculously heal PCOS through becoming super, super skinny. That was like what I believed. And it's what I tried to do for a really, really long time. So that was how it all began.
Wow. Wow. So, well, first of all, that sucks so bad that like started this horrible eating disorder experience. And
Yeah.
I wish doctors, healthcare providers in general, just got a clue about that. Like how giving that just blanket statement, hey, just cut out a whole macronutrient and be super anal retentive about your food for the rest of your life. Good luck.
Right. And they say it in this casual way too, like it's this super simple thing.
Yeah.
And I believed at that point that I was a food addict. And in a way I was sort of in this, I was never a dieter by definition. And I never, until this year when I went through puberty, I never thought about my weight. I was a very thin child. But I was obsessed with food because my mother was a health nut. And so I was going through I didn't know this, but I was going through the whole restrictive mindset super young. And I was sort of doing like the binge cycle just by nature of like, whenever I had a chance to eat junk food, I would go crazy because I knew that it might be my only chance for a really long time. So I only know this now. Back then I was like, whoa, because my brother and I were the same way. We were both like super quote unquote obsessed with food. And we really were. I mean, like we were more obsessed than our friends because we felt like we didn't have access to like the food that we really wanted, the fun, junky food that, you know, all kids want. And so of course my mom was like, you guys are obsessed with food. And she would like control it even more and have more rules, trying to be a good mom, of course. And we were obsessed with food, but it just made it so much worse. And so at 14, going through puberty, gaining weight, like I literally was like wearing a bra size E, like, and, you know, 6 months before I didn't have boobs at all. So it was like a very drastic change. And so I felt uncomfortable in my body. But also when a doctor said to me, you need to watch what you eat, I was like, oh God, okay, this makes sense. Like I guess I have a problem with food and now it's affected my health. So it felt like my fault. Like I had done this to myself.
I can totally see how that would like snowball into like this out of control, like, oh, I'm out of control with food. That's why my boobs are out of control. And if I just kind of reel it in, then maybe my boobs won't keep growing and I'll cure this. And so that's the kind of how you walked out of that meeting where you got that diagnosis as like, oh, I can fix this then.
I can fix this. And I think I immediately went on the Atkins diet. This was, what year would this have been? Like 2002. I feel like the Atkins diet was like in some huge resurgence. It was like the beginning of the like low carb craze. So I lost like a lot of weight really fast. And then of course, you know, it didn't last and everything just got so much worse. And I went very, very quickly into extreme obsession, and it never, like, that was always the pinnacle of like, if I can do the Atkins again, like I did that summer when I was 15, then I'll be healed. Like it was just this constant thing that I was striving for that never happened and never worked. And it just got worse and worse. It was bad.
Well, and here's the thing, your experience is super like your experience, but I know so many people who've told me like almost the exact same thing, that like they just felt this chaos. And they're like, well, if I just could control it better, then I'm going to be all right, or I'll fix it. Or the reason why it's so chaotic is because I'm doing it wrong.
Exactly. And this is my fault and I am totally out of control. And if I could just like I was raised Catholic, so I had this very like, oh my gosh, I'm such a glutton. Like, what if I would like pray to be better? And like it was a mess. But yeah, I have connected with so many people who have had such similar experiences and have gone through that, same like shame spiral of just basically blaming it all on themselves. And that's the worst place to be.
So since that diagnosis, how has your relationship with healthcare professionals been in relation to your PCOS treatment?
That's such a good question. So for a good couple of years there, I was going to a very, Western doctor. I was doing all the things that they told me to do. And we tried all of I went on metformin. I went on the pill. I kind of forget. It was so traumatic. I almost blocked it all up, but I did what they told me to do and it wasn't working essentially. And so I went a supernatural route after that. And that also didn't work. But looking back, I was I was a mess with food. I was so and there was just no way to heal in that state. But so basically I tried quote unquote everything from very, very standard Western medicine to very, very alternative. And then of course my crazy raw vegan, paleo, whatever kind of diet I tried to do, energetic healers, like across the board, I tried everything. And then I sort of gave up for a couple years. And that was also kind of around the time when I was 24, 10 years after that is when I started the Fuck It diet, both for myself and I started writing about it. And in those couple years before then, I was sort of in the fuck it health thing where I was like, nothing has worked. I just need to like see what my body does naturally. And then since then, I've sort of tried a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I work with a natural doctor right now who is amazing at dealing with like the core of more chronic health stuff. But I rebelled hardcore against doctors who I didn't think helped me at all for a long time. And I'm definitely wary. I mean, I definitely take everything with a grain of salt. And it definitely rocked my trust.
Mm-hmm.
In the blanket statements that they'll say and the advice that they'll give. I feel like I need to do my own research now. But yeah, that's a shame because there are wonderful doctors out there and there are things that, really can be helped by Western medicine, but this chronic health stuff, in my experience, it isn't always one of those things. So
yeah, I agree. And I think, especially when fat phobia is a part of it, I think, metformin and the pill or, some of those things, and then also like natural alternative types of treatments for PCOS, those are tools that I know lots of people have used and have helped them. But when you put like, oh, you also need to like watch your weight or you also need to pursue weight loss, well, that's just going to fuck with all of it. And
because
so,
it feels like for some reason, in this culture and the way that they say it too, that's like, well, that's your biggest problem, right? Like that's what we really need to focus on. And whereas it's not like, that is the big scapegoat, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people with PCOS, when they have that diagnosis, they're given those blanket statements. They're told to go on these extreme diets. So even when they're given other advice, it's really hard to really trust a medical provider that doesn't seem to respect your body as is.
I know, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hence the trauma. I mean, that was such a great way to like put that all together, was like you were traumatized by going to these people who are supposed to help you.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah. And, it seems like almost like a pendulum that you experienced of like, they told you what to do. You did exactly what they told you and it didn't work. And so then you said, fuck them. And then so you're on this other side. And then somehow you kind of came to this place of meeting the right people for you to give you the insight that works for you, but always checking it with like what works for you, like trusting your own instincts still along the way,
And
Gosh.
that took a really long time, and is really hard because it does kind of take a bit of luck to trust that you're going to find the right people for you and the right support. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you also had to be able to trust your body and trust yourself with those decisions.
Oh yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like switching between different types of medicine can almost feel like switching between diets, where it feels like it has to be one extreme or the other. But ultimately, you can pick and choose what works for your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. The body trust thing is the biggest thing with food and with any sort of supplement or medicine or healthcare provider.
So how do you tell your loved ones about your PCOS?
Since it all started when I was in high school, it was kind of like it was this not very great focus for my mother and I, because she, I mean, truly out of the love in her heart, was trying to cure me and learn everything she could about it and buy every supplement and take me to any sort of, nurse practitioner, doctor, natural. I mean, she was like, she really, really cared. However, we were still looking at it through this diet and weight lens. So it was super destructive and very stressful. She has been like the point person all along. And she truly, through time and explaining to her what this did to my mind and my body and my heart and the way that I relate to myself, she gets it now. But it was a very intense relationship and experience to go through in high school and college with her. And she'd already been the health nut. Like I was obsessed with food because she was this health nut before. So it was nuts in that way. And other than that, I mean, I tell friends, I explain. At this point, I don't have this shame about it. Before, I had this shame about it because I believed that it was my fault, that I had caused it, and I was continuing to cause it because of my eating and binging, which is because of dieting. But so I didn't really talk about it. I think I would mention it to my best friend or my best friends. And then maybe when I was on some crazy diets in college, I would say, well, I have health stuff and hormonal stuff. So that's why I only eat raw food or whatever. So I would but it was always, me trying to explain why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. Why am I taking the supplements that I'm taking? Why am I so tired? Why? But in more recent years, I've now been diagnosed, which is interesting. And I do think that it connects here, but it's not everyone's reason that they have PCOS. But I definitely had very, very high heavy metals, which I've learned more recently, and some like chronic viruses as well, which can be, for some people, can be like an even deeper cause of hormonal stuff and PCOS symptoms. So now I've sort of been doing all this work with this natural doctor to support my body, to support my liver. So I still am kind of in this funny, in this chronic health healing world. And I tell people because I write about this, I'm very open about it now. But the funny thing is that PCOS isn't my focus anymore, because the symptoms, I definitely still have symptoms like oily skin and acne, which has gotten better, but it's still there, and some excess hair. But a lot of the symptoms have gotten a little bit better from focusing on some of the things that I have that are even below the PCOS. So I've now become somebody who's like, well, I have some chronic health stuff and I'm sort of always dealing with it. And I'm not perfectionistic about it anymore, because you can't be. But I have now become a person who sort of just talks about it all of the time, in a way that I try to not be like dogmatic about it, because who knows, what's right for other people. But I am a person who's like, yeah, I have chronic health stuff and I'm figuring it out as I go.
That's awesome. It's really neat to hear how that story changed over time, how it did that. One thing I'm curious about, because you've talked about your relationship with food, and anyone's listening who is not familiar with your work, they need to check out the Fuck It Diet, the podcast, the Fuck It Diet, your book that's coming out, like all those things that are all of your work they're amazing. And so you've been someone that's shared for years now about your relationship with food. And how do you put together like PCOS and how it specifically affected your relationship with food?
That's a good question. Well, I'm sure that PCOS added to or was one of the foundations of the reason I believed that I had to diet. I would hear people talk about intuitive eating. I would hear, this and that, different ways to heal. There were times when I was like, I think I have a problem with food, but I have to get this under control. I am hurting myself by eating or whatever, or what, it just, the stakes felt so high because of what I believed was the cause of PCOS. I thought it was food, I thought it was weight, and I thought it was carbs and sugar. So I just had I was just constantly trying to eat the smallest amount possible or the smallest amount of carbs possible. And I was always hungry and I was always thinking about food. And, I'm really not sure how much I personally had insulin resistance. Like, I don't know what level it ever was. I really don't think that I have it now. It's possible that it was like a, how PCOS, there are so many different symptoms you can have in different, quantities. I don't know that it was ever my biggest one. But I definitely believed that I was obsessed with food because there was something broken in me. And what I've come to understand and see firsthand, over many years of being healed with food now, that for me at least, and for many people, it was the diet that was causing the binging and the obsession with food. And I really, Julie, I loved listening to your one interview, I think that you did with Lara Thomas, where you were kind of explaining how important carbs are for people with PCOS, and that you can support the body with either supplements or with metformin or other things like that, but that actually cutting out food and cutting out carbs is not going to heal the core problem. And I just thought that was just to hear it out of your mouth was amazing. And that is the way that I think of healing, is supporting the body to function optimally, but not starving it or punishing it.
Yeah. And that's the big problem that I have with medicine right now with PCOS, is that it expects anyone with PCOS to have to torture themselves. Like, you just have to cut out the carbs and feel like shit. And right. I feel like that's putting the cart before the horse. I'm like, you don't have to cut out the carbs to manage insulin. Like, there's so many things that you can do that are going to be actually feel good and make you be like, oh, I want to do more of this, instead of I just need to feel like shit all the time. No, there's lots of things we can do. And that's where I feel like my cheesy thing I always say is carbs are not PCOS's enemy. Fat phobia is that constant, how you were saying, you just had to eat a smaller amount and as little as possible. And that would mean that you're doing the least amount of harm to yourself. And honestly, that kind of push to feel like you had to just keep dieting as hard as you could. That probably was increasing insulin more than anything else,
Yeah. Yeah, completely. And that was definitely my experience. And I had this sort of I call it an epiphany because I don't know how to explain it any other way, but it was in this moment. I was paleo at the time, so I was trying to eat the smallest amount of carbs possible. It was my last ditch effort to try and quote unquote heal myself from PCOS, because they claim to heal things, especially things like PCOS. And I was binging and I was so upset. I was like, I can't believe I'm still doing this. And I feel like there were some paleo people who were starting to speak out about how going low carb ruined their hormones. And it was blowing my mind, because in my brain, I believed that carbs were bad for your hormones. And to hear that going low carb actually screwed up people's hormones and gave them the symptoms that I was experiencing that I was attributing to PCOS, it genuinely blew my mind. And I started listening more to these people and researching this more. And then I had this epiphany that I had basically caused and perpetuated this relationship with food, that it was never, ever going to end unless I deliberately stepped out of it and became okay with whatever weight gain needed to come and stay. And that my health would sort itself out, or I would figure out health after I went through that process. It was like all in one day, all in one moment. It was like a weird download of like trust and this conviction. It was very extreme. And it was what became the Fuck It diet. But I had suffered so much for so long, and it had been my worst enemy for so long. And I just, in a moment, sort of understood that this wasn't good for my health. This wasn't good for PCOS. This wasn't good for my relationship with food or my happiness. And it wasn't sustainable. And that was the big switch. And it wasn't like it all healed in a day, but the conviction and the journey began there. And it's been going in that direction ever since. And it's bleeding into other things, like the way that I talk about health and chronic health stuff with people.
Well, that's so amazing that it was like an extreme switch, but I can't imagine the buildup from the time you're 14 and that's all you learn about PCOS is that carbs are bad. And yeah, I can't imagine how enlightening that was and how freeing it was.
It was amazing. And I didn't have anyone like Julie, telling me that this was fully legit for PCOS. Like, I wish that I had, but there was just something inside of me that was like, this is wrong. Like, this isn't working anymore. And I don't really know what the answer is. I don't really know why, but I'm going to like find my way in the dark and like figure out another way to approach this, which is why when I hear people like you guys talking about this and talking about PCOS specifically, with why on a very like biological level, dieting and restricting carbs is not helpful, I just get so excited because it was this very intuitive thing that I was following. But to hear, to finally, obviously immediately I did all the health at every size research to see how weight and health were not, as connected as we've all been told. But just the more I hear about this, the more excited I get, the more people are gonna get the message. It's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree. It is really exciting. And it's so great that Julie's kind of started a revolution in the PCOS.
I know. It's so great.
Yeah. Well, I know you've mentioned other chronic conditions a couple of times. I would love to learn how you perceive PCOS and other chronic conditions in the realm of body positivity.
That's such a great question. Basically, I have come to very strongly believe that weight and, for the most part, the way we eat is not the cause or the big problem with both PCOS and other chronic health problems. And I'll kind of go into what I experience and what I have experienced, but that it is this big scapegoat. And really, it comes down to genetics. It comes down to environmental, overload combined with genetics. Like, what can your body handle or not handle that may be different from somebody else? And stress. I mean, stress is, when I look at my particular symptoms and the way I sleep and energy level and skin, and stress is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, I can handle so many things, and then if you add in chronic stress into the mix, it just is too much for my body, and it totally, like, I really need to take a step back and sort of take care of myself. And then for me, some chronic viruses have been kind of in my picture, like Epstein-Barr has been something that's definitely affected my health. And it may have coincided with PCOS. It may be something that came later. I'm not fully sure exactly how it's worked together. But the scapegoating with weight is something that breaks my heart at this point, because that is the first thing that people go to. That's the first thing that the doctors go to. And it's the first thing that, patients themselves will assume this is my fault because I eat this way, or or more likely because I am this size. And that's just, the focusing on that is just not going to help. It just puts us in this, talk about stress.
Mm-hmm.
It just puts us in a shame spiral and just adds to the stress and can make symptoms worse just from that alone. But yes, the chronic health thing and the blaming it on weight, whereas weight can be either just a healthy genetic set point or a symptom of chronic health stuff, but then we're blaming it on weight. It's just heartbreaking because we're all getting caught in this cycle of blaming ourselves and dieting when that's just besides the point.
Mm-hmm. I love how you called it the scapegoat. I think that's like the way we eat and like the things that we choose to do, like what we put in our mouth or how we move our body, how that's the scapegoat. Because really, yeah, the research supports you 100% because genetics and environmental stress and our amount of power that we have in the world, that's like 75% of our health outcomes. Like what we eat and move our body, that's like less than 25%. But yeah, the scapegoat, I think that's such a great way to put it because I think it is just like, well, the problem's solved, it's their fault. And I really feel like people with PCOS in particular, I hope that they get even like body positivity. Sometimes I think it's co-opted, but I know it's how a lot of times people get into this conversation. So I think it's important, but like even deeper, like fat positivity or body liberation, I think people with PCOS can, I feel like I want them to get this so much because for that condition in particular, like you said, stress is such a big part of it. And we don't all have access to ways to de-stress. Some of it's like systemic oppression is going to keep some people stressed. And so there's only so much a person as an individual can do. So, we all that are on this page of like body liberation or or body positivity, whatever you want to call it, the more we can really support that to help shift the way the world is looking at bodies, I think that's going to help people with PCOS to lower stress because it's going to make some changes. So, and so then it's not that stupid scapegoat, like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of most chronic illnesses, like there are just so many things to worry about and stress about. So if you're on top of that, you're worrying about your body and you have shame around the way you move and what you're eating, it's just such a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And I feel like the biggest stressor for a lot of people is not only that, but like I'm experiencing this because of something that I have done. This is my fault. Like that gets kind of like peppered into all of the stress over body and the way you're eating and the way you're moving is then this like deep, it's shame really. It's a shame that my struggles are my own fault when that's not true. It's
right.
It's so that'll just put you under. I mean, that is a recipe for, that can be part of feeling depressed is feeling like I'm in this cycle and it's my fault and I don't know how to get out.
Yeah. And having PCOS, people are already at higher risk for any mood disorder because PCOS starts in the hypothalamus. So that's where mood is regulated. And what is up with that though? Like, why do so many people walk away from the doctor's office saying that, oh, I caused my PCOS? Like it is legitimately been established that it's genetic. Like, like I know you even said that you're in your family, your dad's sister. Yeah.
I know. But yet I was like, no. Well, I think it's a little bit of, I definitely think it's the way that they frame it because they say, I think a lot of doctors will say, okay, well, this is exacerbated by the way you eat and move. You need to do better, So then you're like, oh man, I've done this to myself. And if I can do better, then this will be under control. But then there's this sort of like this thing that we do where we're like, I can heal this. It's like we want the illusion of control. We want to believe that this is something that will go away, right? If we just work hard enough. So I think both of those things together, just if we kind of delude ourselves into believing that it's our fault, but because it's our fault, we can also reverse it.
Yeah, and I think it plays into even like with medical professionals when they don't know a lot about something. A lot of times they'll blame the patient, especially when the patient is upsized.
Right,
So if you
right.
have people with PCOS, and it's almost, I feel like it comes as instinct to them. They're so used to blaming people for their size, and it's just another condition. And so you have this whole misconception that's affecting people's entire lives. And I always think like, now we know better, but how many women live their entire life thinking that they caused their PCOS, living with that pain?
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. It is. I wish medical professionals understood their power in that way. And Caroline, what do you wish more health professionals knew about, like specifically in this area or any other area with PCOS? What do you wish like they just got more?
I wish they understood that it's not caused by weight or carbs. Mm-hmm. That this correlation and causation confusion causes so much pain and is such a detour. And that, I mean, I think that is obviously that's the biggest confusion, I think, for people. And then the biggest source of pain and shame that I've caused this. So when you tell someone, oh, your weight is really making this so much worse, you really need to work on this. Again, it's the scapegoat again. And if they all just knew what you know, Julie, if they could just just that carbs are not the enemy. You need to fuel your body. Weight is not the enemy. We need to be befriending our bodies. That stress is this thing where if you tell someone, oh, you're stressed, like you need to not be stressed, like that doesn't really work. So really giving people, that just causes more stress. Oh my God, my stress is causing my health problem. So it's more about like having people understand that how shame and stress are so tied together, and some, empowering people and giving them tools to, support their body and their emotions. I mean, really an integrative approach is what's necessary, but just the understanding that it's not weight and it's not carbs, and to be able to support the body would be so great. I think we're going in that direction, but we're not there yet.
What is the best and the worst PCOS advice that you've ever given?
The worst was just diet, just watch your carbs and fat and exercise. That was in this casual way at 14. That was the worst. And then whatever I extrapolated from that, where I was like, okay, great. If I become super, super skinny, it was also this thing I think my mom read something on some message board that was like something about body weight and estrogen. And like, if you really lower your body weight, it helps with like whatever hormone balance, like, which is just such bullshit. Like it's just wrong. But I don't know. I like digested that in a way where I was like, okay, so if I become super skinny, I jumped to the next thing. I was like, not only will I manage symptoms, I will heal. Like it was this weird, like magical thing where I was like, I'm going to heal this by being super skinny. So anyway, that was really bad advice. The best advice, really, well, like I just said about stress. So really understanding how stress affects your hormones and your health. But it wasn't just being told that, it was then kind of understanding stress on deeper levels, understanding, well, so what causes stress? What is causing me stress? And it's all of the things that we've been talking about right now, and the way we relate to bodies and fat and sexuality and taking up space and all of that. And, blaming yourself for not only health stuff, but anything else. I couldn't just be told, okay, well, stress causes PCOS, because that just stressed me out. I was like, well, okay, what do I do about that? But actually understanding how big that is, and how sort of healing that and managing that, and having tools for that is sort of this lifelong process. At least that's what I've come to experience and come to think, that taking care of yourself, self-care, learning what you need is not something that you can like learn in a weekend. It's this, ever evolving process, and there's always more to learn, and there's always deeper ways to understand what's stressing you out and how to take care of yourself. So I think that and then that bleeds into intuition and how you take care of yourself and how you eat and how you like listen to your appetite and what you want and don't want. And I think that bleeds into just bigger ways of truly taking care of yourself, but it's not as simple as being like, well, don't be stressed.
I keep laughing when you say that, because I'm like, that is totally exactly like the manipulation of that part. And, I don't experience PCOS, but one of the things I experienced is infertility. And I feel like it's the same shit there. And, stress is causing it. I'm like, well, F you. Come on. If I just didn't think about it, would it happen? No.
Right.
But that's when you were talking about the intuition and really, what I was hearing you say is like, you had to come back to yourself, because the way to navigate self-care really had to come down to you connecting to what you knew you needed, and then seeking out answers whenever you couldn't find them, but also checking in, wait, is that going to work for me? And
right.
I think that's the big, one of the things that I wish every person with PCOS really could walk away with is that don't try to ignore your body or what it's telling you, because I think even though PCOS is different, I firmly believe people with PCOS can do intuitive eating work. They can reject diets, and it may just be different, but that doesn't make it not work. It's just different. And so your body will tell you. And I always say your symptoms are your guides to what you need.
Yes, it's so true. Yes, you can when people ask, okay, well, I have to eat a certain way because I feel a certain way if I eat a certain thing, my stomach doesn't feel good. It's like, do what makes you feel good. And then just don't shame yourself if you don't do it, quote unquote, perfectly, right? That intuitive eating is not one size fits all. It really is allowed to be intuitive, and it can be different every day. And you're allowed to, quote unquote, mess up and keep learning,
Right. Yeah. Well, so with that all being said, what tools do you use to help your emotional health and wellness, and maybe physical wellness as well?
Well, in the Fuck It diet / intuitive eating, whatever you want to call it, the Fuck It diet is a very radical way of explaining how intuitive eating should be. That started something that just snowballed into the rest of my life. And it's this deep trust in my body, essentially, prioritizing rest, on a radical level, which has definitely, I feel like that's very similar to the Fuck It diet in a way, where I'm nobody gets why I'm so tired and why I need to say no, to these social things that I don't really feel like doing. But by honoring these things, I come out the other side and I feel so much better, and I'm a better friend, and I'm able to figure out what I really do want to spend time on. And so that feels like something that's been kind of level 2 for me of the Fuck It diet. Making sure that you have support, a good therapist, or anyone else who fulfills a similar role has been really important and wonderful. Eating, rest, and being able to talk through mental and emotional things with somebody you trust.
I love it. And sensing so much self-care in there.
Yes. It's just a one big self-care fest is what I would like to make my life. It's not always that way, but I would like to make it that way.
So what have you learned about PCOS that surprised you?
Besides everything else I've said, I think it's been really interesting to see how addressing some even deeper issues than PCOS. It's almost like, I definitely think obviously it's genetic, and it's the way that my body expresses overwhelm, and it's genetic in that way. But I also believe that they're almost symptoms for me of something even more like deeper and stressful to my body. So, working on getting, supporting my body to get out some heavy metals that I was essentially born with. And then looking at my symptoms that I had pre-PCOS, it's really interesting to see that some of these deeper things predated my experience with PCOS. So just to understand that the body really is this very complex and being, and that they're all different from each other, and that supporting my body and replenishing minerals and things that I was really deficient in has kind of helped my PCOS symptoms to sort of naturally regulate. And I would never, cured, I would never use that word. I definitely still, that's where I have PCOS symptoms when things get overwhelming, when I get stressed, when I, can't take care of myself as well, or just, different times. But it's really interesting to see, again, like it comes back to like blaming the eating and exercising and body weight is just like such a joke. Like that's not why we're experiencing, like these things are not our fault. We're born with genetic expressions, and we're living in this world where we can't control the things we come across, and we're doing the best we can to support our bodies and like with the resources that we have. Yeah, it's a very strange perspective that I have on PCOS now, that my focus has become on other health things. It's strange. And it's something that I'm don't have a full grasp on yet. And I'm sort of like in the middle of this journey, I feel like, for me. And I think that in a couple of years, I'll have a better sense of like what I think about it. But I definitely consider myself somebody with chronic health stuff that I'm like working through, and I may always be working through, or like, I don't know, it's kind of this question mark, open-ended thing.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's strange because like I feel like I need to like let that marinate for a while, because something that's been, I don't know, maybe just how I think about bodies or think about experiences is sometimes our body just it's a survival thing, and PCOS may have been something generations ago that helped a whole groups of people able to survive some really horrible event, or
Right.
maybe there's something to it, like you were saying, that it's a deeper kind of issue. So yeah, I don't think it's strange, and I'm really looking forward to whatever you dissect out of this.
Me too.
And it seems like it's very on theme with everything else. Like it just seems like you learned a lot about yourself since your diagnosis, and so I can relate as somebody with PCOS. I feel like as I dive more into it, my body keeps surprising me, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that has made such a positive difference is taking it from the perfectionism, the purifying, the perfecting health, like I have to do this right, and taking it to a place where there's no such thing as purity or perfection with health. It just doesn't exist. And if I can live in that space and still be willing to take care of myself in whatever state I'm in, understanding that perfection and purity is never going to happen, then I'm in this space that's way better and way more supportive.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have one more question for you. What do you wish you could tell yourself after receiving your PCOS diagnosis back in 2002? You said you were 14 or 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you wish you could tell that person?
Oh my God, would I listen? Would I even listen to myself?
Yeah.
I would say, Caroline, I am from the future. And you do not need to go on a diet. You are not a food addict. Your body is perfectly fine. All you need to do is support where you are right now and learn how to eat normally, and learn, like, I would hand myself the book Health at Every Size before any crazy dieting started. I would try to talk really, really fast and get in all the information that I could. But the weird thing is that I think if I hadn't experienced all that, I wouldn't have the perspective that I have today, because it was so miserable that like I had to like hardcore break away from cultural ways of looking at eating and body. So I would want to tell myself so many things about health and weight and carbs and PCOS, but I just don't know if I would have listened to myself.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a theme that I've heard from a lot of people over the years, is that it was kind of like a stumbly kind of journey, but without that journey, they would have not come to trust their own innate wisdom. And
Yeah.
I wish we could wave a magic wand and this would just be something that we're all born with it, but I wish we were all just like given tools to continue to trust it. And I think it would make the PCOS experience a lot different. And things like eating disorders, I wonder if they would be happening, or, I don't think they would be as much. But thank you so much for your time, Caroline. We really appreciate it. And if someone would like to get to know your work, where's a good way for them to find you?
You can go to thefuckitdiet.com. You can pretty much find anything you need over there. Ways to work with me. I have like almost 200 free posts that I have, articles that I've written over the past 7 years. I have a podcast that's free. You can also find me on Instagram at The Fuck It Diet.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all of that in the show notes. It'll be easy for a listener to click on right now. So thank you again so much. It's just such a privilege to hear about your experience.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this rebroadcast of the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. It was created by Julie Duffy Dillon and Kimmie Singh. Audio engineer is Toby Lyles from 24 Sound. Show art by Katie Sanders from Pop and Gray. Music by Tiny Music and titled Super Pop. We are grateful that you listened to our show, and if you'd like more information about Julie's work, go to juliedillonrd.com, and Kimmie's work, go to tastingabundance.com. Thank you for listening to the show, and we hope it gave you more opportunities to experience food peace.
Looking for a side hustle that can have a huge impact? Nucleus Network has been conducting clinical research studies for over 15 years. Right now, Nucleus Network in Minneapolis is looking for healthy people ages 18 to 55 to join their upcoming clinical studies and is offering compensation ranging from $2,000 to $7,000. Get involved today. Check your eligibility now at nucleusnetwork.com. That's nucleusnetwork.com.